name is Jean Donham. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Johnson County, and our timekeeper for today is Polly Horton, also a League member. The League is dedicated to educating voters on political and ballot issues. We encourage informed citizen participation in government. Our membership is open to all persons age 16 or older, and we invite you to join us. Membership information is available at our website, lwvjc.org. Our plan for today is this. We'll begin with brief remarks from each legislator who's with us, and then we will have questions from the co-sponsors of today's forum, and then we will end with questions from the broader audience via the chat feature in Zoom. Today's forum focuses on issues related to the environment. Our co-sponsors are the Iowa City area of the Sierra Club, Iowa City climate activists, Cafe, Clean Air for Everyone, and 100 Grannies. I'd like to introduce our legislators. Legislators, feel free to give a wave and maybe say hello to the audience as we go around. Begin with our senators. Joel Bolkcom represents District 43. Kevin Kinney represents District 39. Zach Wahls is coming. He represents District 37. He's been delayed a bit. Representatives with us today are Mary Mascher, representing District 86. Dave Jacoby, representing District 74. And Christina Bohannan, representing District 85. Bobby Kaufman was not available to be with us today. And Amy Nielsen, as many of you may have read in the news, is suffering from the effects of COVID-19 and is not able to be with us today either. We'll start the forum today then with those 3-minute summaries from each of our legislators on current legislative matters that are of interest to them. And we'll start with Senator Bolkcom, representing District 43.
Well, good morning, everybody. I would like to thank the League for hosting us virtually this morning. It's good to see our Hollywood Squares friends and neighbors this morning, and also to all the co-sponsoring groups. I look forward to the discussion today. We are in the week 7 of the Iowa General Assembly, and it's really hard to kind of characterize where we are. I think everybody's familiar with the term sore loser, and nobody likes a sore loser. But what we have at the State House are sore winners. These are the legislature. The last election, Republicans were resoundingly reelected to lead our state. And their agenda essentially is a grievance agenda that has a whole host of issues that I think make it hard for Iowa to present itself in a positive light to people that live here, as well as people from outside our borders. The Iowa Business Council last week had a report out saying that Iowa is in a crisis circumstance because Iowa is losing population. And I think when you look at the agenda that we've seen so far from the Republicans, it's kind of, it goes between settling scores and taking care of special interests. This last week was in the latest round. We both in the House and Senate, we debated a voter suppression bill, essentially based on conspiracy theories and lies about our election process. As people know, we just had an enormously successful general election, record turnout, record early voting, record mail voting, and we debated a bill basically to make it harder for people to vote. Really a trend that's going on in like 40 states across the country in response to the former president's loss last November. So it's been a rather tough session so far. There's a whole bunch of other bills. Higher education, there's been 15, 16 bills taking on higher education. We approved school aid, or the Republicans approved school aid in the last couple of weeks. The governor signed the bill this year, which provides about 1/3 of the money that we've seen to our local schools in the middle of the pandemic. We haven't seen any legislation dealing with the pandemic. We haven't seen any legislation dealing with climate change. We haven't seen any legislation dealing with racial equity. We haven't seen any legislation dealing with improving water quality, but we have seen bills that really target individuals, school districts in kind of a we want to settle the score kind of way. So it's been kind of a rather depressing session so far. The first funnel comes up this next Friday, where we hope a bunch of these really bad ideas go away. I look forward to your questions this morning.
Thank you, Senator Bolkcom. Senator Kinney.
Hi, thanks to the League for having this forum today, along with the other environmental organizations. It's been a very busy last few weeks. There are some bills that I've been kind of behind and trying to get through to over to the House. One of those would be a sexual misconduct by a police officer. That was something that was brought into me because of my work at the sheriff's office, and something that I knew about is when a officer would have consensual sex with someone that was in custody. If you're in the jail or at a police station or so forth, it's against the law, and it should be. But for someone that before they ever got to the jail or law enforcement facility, it is not against the law to have consensual sex. Probably the biggest bill that I've been pushing is Senate File 243, which it's been named Noah's bill. It's abuse of a corpse, failure to assist, and interference with official acts. And this has got to do with the death of Noah Herring and how the individuals that were with him did not report this to law enforcement, and it took them 4 days to figure out through an investigation that he was in the reservoir by diving rock. The only thing that they could wound up being able to charge them with was the theft of the money that Noah had in his wallet that they split, into the destruction of his property. Representative Jacoby has been working with me on this and is trying to get it, once we get it out of the Senate, over to the House. And as far as the environmental side, a bill that we passed out of subcommittee and committee this week, Senate Study Bill 1214, is a bill that, due to a reporter from the Cedar Rapids Gazette, I learned that the individuals that apply pesticides could not be fined civilly by the Department of Agriculture. I did some work on this and began working with the Department of Ag, along with Senator Zumbaugh, and we have a bill that is passed our committee and is going to be taking up the ability for the Department of Ag to fine people that apply pesticides and so forth. There is another bill in the House, companion bill. So I'm going to stop now.
Thank you, Senator Kinney. And I know that Senator Wahls has just arrived. Senator Wahls, we are inviting legislators to just give a few comments about their interests and things that are going on in the legislature from their perspective. So we welcome you. Senator Wahls.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, was I muted through that whole last few seconds there?
I'm afraid so. Do you want to go back and
All right, no problem. Well, hey, good morning.
We'll restart the clock.
No, that's fine. Thank you. I first of all, I'm sorry for running a little late this morning. I was on another Zoom that was running a little bit long, and but appreciate the opportunity to be with you all this morning. Senator Zach Wahls, live in Coralville, represent the west side of Iowa City, Coralville. rural Johnson County going up to Solon, and then east over to Cedar County and down into Muscatine County, representing the community of Wilton. Serving in my first year as the Senate Minority Leader, my first term elected in 2018. Just a couple of things that we've been working on and that we're tracking very closely. Something that I know that the league has a lot of interest in is the redistricting process. This is, of course, the year where once a decade, the state redraws all of the lines for our legislative districts and our congressional districts. And so this is going to be, obviously a year that has a lot of importance for the next decade. One of the things that we learned in the last few weeks that has some pretty serious ramifications for redistricting is that the previous presidential administration ran into a lot of trouble with the census. And so the data coming down from the federal government has actually been delayed, potentially past when the Iowa Constitution says the lines have to be drawn by. If we miss that deadline because of the delay in the federal census data, the state Supreme Court has to cause the lines to be drawn. The Constitution does not spell out how exactly that process will unfold, but we expect they would work with the Legislative Services Agency, the nonpartisan group of folks who ordinarily would be tasked with drawing maps for consideration by the legislature. And so it's definitely going to be an unusual process this year. We are watching very closely to ensure that there are no shenanigans, and we're very, very interested in making sure that this is done fairly, and that when this process is complete, we have a fair set of maps, and that we do not have politicians picking their voters. So I know that's only one issue, but it's an issue that affects every other issue because it determines in many ways the balance of the legislature. We are very fortunate to have a redistricting process in Iowa that is in many ways a model for the rest of the country. Historically been very nonpartisan, and we're just hoping that we can continue that legacy this year.
Thank you, Senator Wahls. We'll go ahead then to Representative Mascher.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I'm looking forward to a robust discussion today. We have lots to share with you and lots to talk about, not all of it good. I think Joe pretty much summarized what we're up against and how frustrating it has been for us who really believe in good government. And I know the league has been really watching a lot of these bills as well, and we'll be glad to share what we know. I just also wanted to thank all of the sponsors this morning. We really appreciate you taking the time to participate in this. And we do have some things to share with you in regards to bills that are coming through that will affect our environmental community. Good news, it's funnel week. And that means that if a bill hasn't gone through either a House or Senate committee, is dead for the session. So we are looking forward to killing a whole lot of bills that have been really problematic and extremely damaging to the state and our universities and just Iowans in general. So that part is a good news piece, and we're looking for a little good news right now, right? I spent a lot of time on the elections bill. Christina's on the state government committee with me, and so that took up a great deal of our time this week. And we spent a lot of time on the floor debating it. It really does infringe on a voter's right. And one of the things that we've been concerned about is it limits the amount of time that you can request an absentee ballot. It limits the amount of time you can vote and basically return those ballots or vote at a satellite or in person on election day. They reduce the number of hours from 9 o'clock closing time till 8 o'clock closing time. The other thing that is really problematic and probably one of the worst parts of the bills, anything that comes in after election day, even though the vote would have been cast on time and it was mailed properly, it will not count. And so those are big concerns for all of us. And obviously, we're extremely disappointed that this bill came through and was passed. I did want to mention that we did have school funding finalized. It's 2.4%, totally inadequate in light of the fact that we have less than 6,000 fewer students in our schools right now due to the COVID crisis. And so that means that districts will get a lot less funding for the students who will be back in the classrooms next year. So that's extremely problematic for us as well. I wanted to mention the bottle bill. Christina is going to be one of our point persons on that in the House, and they haven't had a subcommittee yet, and yet that bill is supposed to come through state government this week. So we're extremely concerned about what will be in it, and we have some knowledge of pieces, but not the entire. So I'll stop there and thank everybody for being here. We have over 70 people on this today. So thanks everybody for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you. And Representative Jacoby.
Oh, thank you so much to the League and Sierra Club and Climate and Cafe and the Grannies for hosting this morning. And if you notice that my picture blinks out once in a while, it's because our dogs notice the raccoon in the backyard. And every time you're on a Zoom, they come up to you to open the door and let them go chase the raccoon around. It's really good to see. It's been a tough couple of weeks, but some of the positive things I'm working on Monday at 12:30, we do have a subcommittee for the Midwest Rail Pact. I've talked to a couple of the Republicans. They tend to be younger that are interested in the passenger rail system. And so we're going to have that subcommittee Monday at 12:30. Also, I've been working on taxes. Now it's a little late. We spent January on the time important things of gun constitutional amendments and abortion constitutional amendments when we should have been working on important things like the taxes that we're all filing right now, and small businesses with their PPP, and individuals and families with their pandemic unemployment insurance want to know how that affects their taxes for the year 2020. So I'm pushing hard to exempt PPP from state income tax. And I'm also looking at what we can do for unemployment insurance, especially the pandemic bonuses, to be exempted from state income tax because individuals and families really need that. I serve on Ways and Means as ranking member, Commerce, Natural Resources, and Economic Growth. I'm also on the House Democratic Leadership Team. And one success from last week, Walden Place was struggling to find a vaccination provider. And I talked to a number of the businesses, Hy-Vee, Walgreens, CVS, the University of Iowa, and they all teamed up, and Hy-Vee led with the vaccination supplies to vaccinate everyone at Walden Place and the staff this last Tuesday. So it's nice to have some of those victories. The negative thing is now we only have about 10,000 more people in line right now to get the vaccination, and we need that supply. But I look forward to the conversation today, and thank you again for hosting the forum.
Thank you. And Representative Bohannan.
Hey everybody, good to see you. Thanks for having us. Again, I want to thank the League and the co-sponsors. It's terrific that you put this on, and I'm really happy to see so many people here. So, this is my first session. I'm on Judiciary, State Government, and the Information Technology Committees. I will echo a little bit of what Joe said. It's a little shocking, some of a lot of the bills that are going through, just how extreme they are and how out of touch they are with what everyday Iowans really need right now, which includes COVID relief, small business relief, those kinds of things. And so we have been working on a lot of defense here. I want to say a bit, Mary Mascher here mentioned the election bill. We worked really hard on that. And I really want to give a shout out to Mary, Representative Mascher, sorry. She did a great job steering the caucus through a really complicated bill. And I think the caucus did a really good job on the floor on that bill. And so I was really proud to be part of it. I was proud of our caucus that day. I think we made the point that this bill does not make it easier to vote. It makes it harder to vote, and it does absolutely nothing to increase voter security. It's being presented as this voter integrity bill, it really doesn't do that. What it does is it cuts everything. It cuts the time frames for voting at every possible turn, and that does nothing to improve voter security. So I think the only way you can make sense of this bill, frankly, is that the Republicans feel like they need to give something to their base. Their base thinks the election was stolen, and they need to pass a bill to make it look like they're doing something for voter integrity, even though it actually doesn't do anything for voter integrity. So it's really unfortunate. We did our best, and I'm proud of what we did. But just, you know, we've got to keep fighting that fight. It's so important. It underlies everything else. So, and I want to thank the league for coming, and we had people there talking at the public forum, giving public comments, and so that was really important. I think in the end we had more than 1,200 comments against and something like 30 in favor, and that really speaks volumes to how the state feels about this. So I'm really proud of people for coming out and making those comments known. I'm working on an anti-human trafficking bill and one of the things I'm doing with it is I proposed an amendment to give an affirmative defense to people who are victims of human trafficking, who get caught up in doing bad things because they are victims of trafficking. And so working on an amendment for that. As Mary said, I'm also on the bottle bill. And so one of the things I really hope to get out of today is your comments on that. There are a number of different bills that are being proposed, running the gamut, everything from repealing it to doing, you know, other good things potentially. And so we need to figure out, what I would love to hear from you is, you know, what are the most important features of that, and what can we live with? What can we negotiate on? Because I worry about where this legislature is right now. And so we really need to think about what we can do. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much. And I look forward to the conversation.
Once again, thank you all very much. It's interesting to hear what all is going on in Des Moines from your perspectives. At this time, we will begin questions, and we will start with a question from the League, and then one from each of our co-sponsors. And once we have completed those questions, we'll turn to questions from members of the audience via the chat feature in Zoom. I'll remind our co-sponsors that questions are limited to 1 minute. Our timekeeper will be cueing you. Please observe that time limit so that we can address as many questions as possible today. And legislators, please limit your responses to 2 minutes. Again, Polly will be monitoring for you. And all legislators are welcome to join in responding to each question. Legislators, I ask that if you would like to respond to a question, please use the raise hand function in Zoom. It's located in the reactions button on your screen, and this will kind of allow us to move efficiently. And as I see your hands up, I will call on you so that we can move as I say, as efficiently as possible going forward. I'm going to begin with the League question. The United Nations has set sustainable development goals that pertain to several issues, including environmental concerns for affordable and clean energy, clean air and water, and climate action. How do you envision the Iowa legislature addressing any or all of these important environmental goals? Senator Bolkcom.
A lot of buttons to push this morning. Good morning. Great question. I mean, there is so much work to do on the issue of climate change in Iowa, both from more renewable energy. There is a bill in that, I think it's moving, or it may be moving in the House to fix Iowa's solar credit, which has been a huge success over the years. Trying to put some more money behind it. We spend $5 million now, and I think there's a bill to move it to 10. And also decouple from the federal credit, which is going to expire probably. So that's one bill. You know, the Senate moved a kind of a half-hearted effort at the bottle bill in terms of the other environmental thing going on. But we have so much work to do with Iowa agriculture in terms of getting ready for climate change. We have work to do to help cities and landowners prepare for more extreme flooding and more heat waves, and we're just doing very little. We've taken money that we did spend on energy efficiency, helping homeowners and businesses become more energy efficient. 2 years ago, the Republicans gutted that. So there is really no proactive agenda from the majority party. The governor does not have an agenda on this. The Republicans that lead the legislature, I think, feel like the climate change is not really an issue that they need to spend much time on. And of course, the issue of water quality, we're not able to change one word in any law that we currently have to make it possible to clean up Iowa's rivers and lakes. So we've got a lot of work to do. We just have a group of folks that are in charge that don't hold these environmental issues in as much of a priority, unfortunately.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Wahls.
Well, thanks for the question. Climate change continues to be a pressing issue for our state, for our country, or for our planet. The very first bill that I introduced as a legislator called for the amending of the Iowa Energy Plan to get us to 80% renewable energy by 2035 and 100% by 2050. Needless to say, Republicans did not advance that bill and don't have any interest in moving similar legislation. As we saw just the other week in Texas, excuse me, we know that more extreme weather events are going to continue to hit our country. And so more investment has to be done in terms of weatherization and being prepared for those events when they do strike. I do think that we have a lot of work to do as well in our agricultural industry. I am cautiously hopeful that USDA Secretary Tom Vilsack is going to make that a priority. With him serving as the secretary, it was not as much of a priority during his time in the Obama administration, but I have heard and seen him in multiple interviews in the lead up to his confirmation talk proactively about the importance of using agriculture as an opportunity to sequester carbon, which is frankly kind of a new approach in terms of his approach to agricultural issues. So I'm cautiously hopeful about that. And I think in terms of the broad picture, continuing to create incentives for cities, counties, school districts to adopt the use of renewable energy. Auditor Rob Sand actually had a report out, I believe, just last night, showing that cities, counties, taxpayers could save hundreds of millions of dollars in the future. So if they switched to renewable energy. So I hope that that's a compelling argument for folks to consider. And I would love to see Rob identify more opportunities, when it comes to the use of solar energy for our local and state government.
Thank you. And Representative Mascher.
Thank you, Jean. Senator Bolkcom shared a number with us yesterday in one of our forums that was just somewhat startling. He talked about that there will be 60 more days in Iowa of 90-degree temperatures or more. And if you think about the impact of that and what that means for our citizens, our crops, it has an impact on a lot of things. And I look at that and think, we have to prepare for the future. Obviously, climate change is real. We all know that. And it's a matter of convincing others that we need to be reacting to that now and putting some things in place that are going to make a difference. 20 years ago, we started down that path of wind energy, and we as a state have been amazing in terms of our commitment to that. And it's a renewable source, and it's something that, again, we should all be proud of. We're one of the top states in the nation in terms of wind energy generation. And again, I don't know that people are aware of that, but we should be excited about that and be sharing that with others as well. I have solar on my home. I know many of you do as well. Those solar tax credits are critical right now. And again, if we're going to see that many more days of sunshine, we ought to be taking advantage of that and providing more incentives for Iowans to be able to put those solar panels on their homes and government entities to do the same. Our school district is looking at that. We've been also talking to the university, our cities, about how they can do that and incorporate that into their new building plans. So I'll stop there, but I think this is an important issue, and I am hopeful that we can further an agenda that really and truly will impact Iowans in a positive way. Thanks.
Thank you. And Senator Kinney.
One of the things that I was involved with last summer was a group of legislators had gotten together and kind of had an interim. It wasn't a true interim committee, but it was legislators that got together dealing with soil health and looking at how we can take soil health, and Zach is right on the sequestering carbon and how agriculture can be a leader in that arena. A lot of that, again, has to do with the way we till our soil to cover crops. There is some individuals that would like to start changing how we look at the way that we are farming for water retention and the retentions of the nitrates. So I think that is a positive. And then wind energy and wind and solar, expanding how we are the tax credits. The tax credits to me are working. So, but there again, I look forward to your comments too, everybody's.
Thank you, Senator.
Gene, if I can make maybe just one brief point on what Senator Kinney just made. When we were working on a solar bill in the last, I believe it was last year, trying to protect some of the ways that solar is regulated in the state, you actually had the Sierra Club and the Iowa pork producers coming together to try and protect that legislation, which is just a great illustration of how politics sometimes makes for strange political bedfellows. But it was an interesting illustration of how the politics around some of the renewable energy generation issues, if not necessarily on other environmental issues, are starting to shift simply because the cost of running, a power line out to a more remote farm can be obviously a lot more expensive. And so if you have that on-site solar generation, there are a lot of folks who may not be traditional environmental allies are starting to see that things really do pencil out and make a lot of sense.
Thank you, Senator. I think we'll go ahead then to our next question, and that will come from Jareen Denning on behalf of CAFE.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Nod. Great. So thank you for giving me this opportunity today. It has been over a decade since the tobacco prevention bill was passed by the Iowa legislature, and state funding for prevention has been cut by almost 70%. The most recent bill to die in committee was HF 98, a bill that would have recognized and treated e-cigarettes as tobacco products. Failure to pass these and other tobacco safety laws contributes to lifetime addictions and poor health for hundreds of thousands of Iowans and over 5,000 preventable deaths every single year. These human costs also come with substantial economic costs to the taxpayers of Iowa. The public health and safety community are already doing everything they can. So if you would please share with us what you think you and other legislators could and should be doing to be more effective in passing these public health and safety laws.
Representative Mascher.
Thank you. And thank you again, and CAFE and all of our groups that have been so effective in promoting these bills. What we can do is obviously propose legislation. What we can't do is get it passed unless we get support from Republican legislators. So anything and everything you can do to work with others throughout the state, those coalitions are really important. And if you can provide that opportunity to speak to those legislators, the Republicans need to hear from their constituents, because that's what's going to make the difference in them moving legislation forward. And I'll be honest, they just have not been very supportive of getting some of these bills passed. I have proposed increasing the tobacco tax again. We haven't done that for a long time. Those are things that we need to continually be looking at, again, to discourage our young people from smoking. But there, obviously vaping is another pathway to smoking, and we know that. And we know that it's detrimental. And so the more that we can do to, again, educate, encourage others to educate their own legislators, the better. Thanks.
Thank you. Senator Bolkcom.
Yeah, thanks. Jareen, thanks for the question. And I noticed Eileen Fisher's at the meeting this morning too, a longtime advocate with you on these issues. You know, it's been a while since we've made progress on tobacco. This year, the pandemic will be the leading cause of death, and it will surpass tobacco for the first time. I assume tobacco will take its place at the top again as the pandemic subsides, but more than 5,000 people a year still are dying from tobacco, which I think is hard for many people to comprehend. Back in 2009, we banned smoking in workplaces. That was under Democrats. The last time we raised the tobacco tax by $1 a pack, that was Democrats. And I just think advocates need to keep talking about these issues. We have folks in charge of the General Assembly and the governor's office that they're hard pressed to pay attention to the science and pay attention to the really compelling data that you've shared and others have shared about the huge economic benefit and human health benefits to making tobacco a little less available to our youth. And as you know, we've made progress on that, but with our disinvestment in kind of prevention and cessation, those numbers just continue to kind of slowly creep up. So thanks for your work on this. We just need to keep raising the issues and seeing if we can get the other side to take it seriously.
Representative Bohannan.
Yes, hi, thanks for the question. This is something that's really important to me. Personally, my dad grew up on a tobacco farm and started smoking at 9, and he died of emphysema at age 59. And so this is something that I've cared a lot about. And at the university, I was on the committee that added e-cigarettes to our anti-tobacco policy to make us a smoke-free campus, but also a tobacco-free campus. And so this is something I've been working on. I agree. I think we just have not seen the Republicans care that much about this issue. Frankly, I also think that it's hard this year just with the COVID and everything else drowning things out, to pay attention to all of these different issues. And so I'm hoping that as we go forward, we can pay more attention to that. I also hope that our younger generation will be more willing to take action on this. It's something that I think we have a pretty, I'll just say we have a lot of older people in the legislature. And I think that as younger people come up, they're, much more aware of the harm of tobacco, and maybe more willing to take action on it. So I'm hoping that will get better. We also have to just make the case over and over with regard to things like e-cigarettes, that it really does run the risk of renormalizing tobacco use and smoking. That's one of my big concerns about e-cigarettes, is that it just becomes more common again to smoke just at the time when we were making that seem like a very unhealthy and dangerous thing to do. So that we just have to keep making that case. A lot of people use e-cigarettes. They say, well, that's that it's a substitute for more harmful regular cigarettes, and of course some people do use it that way, but the risk of renormalizing is much greater. So I think we just need to keep making that case over and over. And I appreciate all the advocacy here. I was in touch with Eileen about this, and I appreciate their work on this, even though it maybe didn't happen this year.
Thank you. We'll proceed then to Tom Karsner, who's going to pose the question on behalf of the Iowa City Area Group of the Sierra Club. Tom?
Thank you. As Zach alluded to, that strange bedfellows can create some movement when it comes to renewable clean energy for bipartisan agreement. And as Joe pointed out, the House File 221 extends and increases the solar tax credits. And first part of my question is whether you see that House File 221 has a clear path to passage. And secondly, we're wondering if there's appetite on your part and on the coalition of other legislators to build for future legislation beyond solar to small non-utility wind turbines, battery energy storage, or green hydrogen production? Could those be things that we can get tax credits for in the future? Thanks.
Well, Tom, I'll maybe just hop in here. Yeah, I can't speak to what the likelihood is over in the House. I do know that we had a bunch of conversations with supportive folks about this before the start of session, and so it kind of cautiously optimistic. Although we'll see how things shake out. Obviously, did Representative Jared Klein just join us? Maybe he can speak to what's going on over there. But in terms of kind of looking forward into other alternative, opportunities, we've heard, I think, over the last decade, the phrase kind of all of the above used to describe our energy policy. I would certainly hope that applies to renewable sources as well, not just to trying to figure out a way to shoehorn coal and oil into the equation as well. So I would certainly be supportive of identifying opportunities to try and nurture some of those maybe kind of younger or less mature sources of energy. But I think we certainly agree that we need more and kind of a diverse source of those fuels and energy sources, precisely because of the need for more resilience in our energy system. We really want to avoid what happened down in Texas, where they got hit, obviously, with an extreme weather event, and they experienced some pretty catastrophic challenges across the entire grid. But that's why having more distributed sources of generation, including some of the ones that you just mentioned, do in fact introduce more grid stability, not less. As a part of that, though, it's not just a question of generation, it's also a question of transmission. We have a grid system that, as you know, is very old, very outdated, has some real challenges in terms of moving electricity around in a timely way. And so that's not necessarily a state issue, that's really a federal issue. But hopefully with President Biden, we actually get Infrastructure Week after 4 years of no Infrastructure Week. Maybe Infrastructure Week will finally arrive and we can start working on some of those grid challenges as well.
Thank you. Senator Bolkcom.
Thanks. Yeah, good. Thanks for the question, Tom. The solar bill in the House, I talked with one of the advocates actually this morning in anticipation of your question, that is potentially in trouble. Apparently, they're waiting for the REC estimate that comes out next month to see how the state revenues are, because this bill would increase the cap by 5. It'd do two things. It would increase from $5 to $10 million, and we have a bit of a waiting list. There'd be some resources to deal with people on a waiting list, and they want to see if there's going to be revenue enough to basically trigger the tax cuts that are already on the books. And that is a priority for the Republican caucus, is more tax cuts for essentially, people that are doing okay in Iowa. So that was the report I got. Whether the decoupling, so there's a money side of the bill, and then there's the question of decoupling from the federal credit so we can continue to have a credit. For about $30 million, this credit has drawn about $350 million worth of private investment. It's employed more than 1,000 people in a full-time way. It's been a smashing success in all 99 counties, dealing with independence, climate change, the whole thing. So it's been really good. This week, another tax credit report came out that showed the research activity credit. We wrote a refund check to Deere & Company for more than $10 million. And we wrote a refund check to Raytheon, formerly known as Rockwell Collins, for more than $10 million. So if you want to compare, we wrote one company a check, two companies a check, and then we've got this other credit that employs small businesses, electricians, contractors all over the state. We're broke. We don't have any money for that. And the other thing I'd say on tax policy is this year, another $90 million is going to be given out from the 2018 tax cut to people that made $500,000 and more a year. Essentially, Iowa's millionaires and a whole bunch of out-of-state millionaires, they're going to get $90 million on top of the roughly $70 million that we just spent on the research activity credit. By the way, of the $70 million on the research activity credit, $41 million of that was in refund checks. Thank you.
Senator Kinney.
Well, Joe covered that very well. I've also heard that it may be in trouble because of the money. So I don't know. But one of the things that in Washington County, I've gone down and they're setting up to help our grid the Tesla battery kind of substations where they are gathering all that solar energy, so they don't have to expand the grid. They're doing it through the batteries, and when they have a need on their grid, they're pulling that from the batteries and so forth. So it's something that they said is much more cost effective to do than building new wires and new power plants. So I really think that they're on to something down there, and especially with all the solar in Washington County. It's in the long run is going to be much more cleaner and more cost effective.
Thank you. And Representative Jacoby.
Thank you. Well, Tom, first of all, I had a sudden urge to run to my closet and get my Chicago Cubs hat on to kind of offset that Red Sox hat. But actually, I'm a little more optimistic on House File 221. It is sitting in Ways and Means right now. It passed out of subcommittee, unanimous, 3-0. There's a very good but somewhat strange partnership between Representative Chuck Eisenhart from Dubuque and Representative Klein, the other half of Senator Kinney's House, one of his 2 House districts, that are working together to get this bill pushed through. I would agree with Senator Bolkcom. It will depend heavily on the March 19th REC numbers that come in, because we're working backwards. Another way that we're working backwards, which is frustrating, and I bring this up at almost every Ways meeting, is we're looking at tax credits, but we have not taken the time, which we did have plenty of time during the COVID of the last 9 months to do it on Zoom, review all tax credits and kind of rebase where we're standing right now. We have the time, and until we move forward, we really do need to review all the tax credits.
Thank you, Representative Jacoby. We will move on then to a question from Jared Klein on behalf of Iowa City climate activists.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
All right. Question for today. In January, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce shifted its stance on climate change and endorsed a market-based price on carbon, very similar to the bipartisan, revenue-neutral carbon pricing legislation that our group advocates for. In fact, such a carbon pricing bill, HR 763, the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, was introduced in the U.S. House in the last session, with 85 Democrats co-sponsoring and 1 Republican co-sponsor. The Iowa City Council, the Press Citizen, and the Johnson County Board of Supervisors have also endorsed HR 763. Given this broad bipartisan support, how do you think we can best move forward to start to address the climate crisis we're now feeling the effects of? I know we've already talked about climate change a little bit today, but I was wondering how you felt about carbon pricing in particular.
Well, Jared, I think that, first of all, I saw Jared Klein pop up and I was thinking about Representative Klein, so I apologize for getting a little confused earlier.
I was wondering about that myself. It's totally understandable.
Yeah. I appreciate the question. The ability of the state legislature to set up a carbon pricing scheme, not impossible, obviously. I know that a few other states have banded together. Clearly not something that Republicans in Iowa have any interest in. It's great to hear that there's some bipartisan support in Washington. I don't really think that's the case here. I don't want to sound defeatist because it's certainly something that needs to get done. But in terms of the things that can attract bipartisan support in Iowa, I think it is going to be things like we've been talking about earlier around solar, what Senator Kinney mentioned earlier with some of those opportunities around carbon sequestration and farming. One of the things that I will say, I've only been in the legislature a few years, but I feel like I have seen or heard the discourse around agriculture and really kind of being a part of the solution to climate change. I feel like that has changed dramatically in the 3 years that I've been around, and I think that a lot of that goes to, frankly, some of the conversations that we had leading up to the 2020 caucuses that were really trying to figure out how can states like Iowa that do have a big agricultural part of our economy be a part of the solution instead of being a part of the problem. And so, I think that we'll keep looking for those opportunities at the state legislative level. It would be terrific to see Congress really take a step forward in terms of putting a price on carbon so we can have fair competition that accounts for the externalities that fossil fuels create when they kind of release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. At the state level, unless we were able to figure out some way to work kind of on a regional coalition basis with other Midwestern states, I don't see that happening just yet. The one key thing that I would mention is trying to make sure that we're able to sell some of those renewable energy credits to states like Illinois and other states that are interested in buying those so that we can continue to foster that investment here in Iowa. Sorry, Paulie.
Senator Kinney.
Senator Kinney, you're still muted.
One of the things that I've been doing is working with a young farmer from Washington County by the name of Mitchell Hora, who is trying to come up with different ways to create a market for agriculture and being able to take the credits on the sequestration. I've met with Secretary Nag down in Washington on a couple of different occasions where he's been working with Mitch, and I think that there is a changing appetite by some or a lot of the farming community that this may be a way to increase income on farms.
Thank you. Senator Bolkcom, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I think, Jared, thanks for the question. I think the federal price of the price of carbon, if we're going to put a tax on carbon, needs to be a federal construct. We need a federal approach to this to make a difference. I think that also that, when you look at agriculture, and I think Secretary Vilsack is looking at ways to incentivize producers to manage carbon on their farms. And I'm not sure what that's going to look like. It sounds like he's just getting into kind of understanding the details about that. I do think Iowa agriculture is a significant contributor of greenhouse gases in Iowa. I don't know, it's more than a quarter, maybe pushing 30%. We've had General Motors announce that they're only going to produce electric cars in about 15 years. Ford has announced they're going to start producing electric cars for the European market. I think the question that we need to start, the conversation we need to start having in Iowa is, what is our role in that? Where are we going to end up in that? We have legislation this session to try and increase the amount of ethanol being used by Iowa consumers, essentially taking out all the pumps at gas stations, but maybe one that would all service ethanol. And I think it's an enormous issue for our state if we look out 10 or 15 years as more consumers are going to be driving electric cars. What will be the demand for biofuels? And what is the transition plan? So I hope that climate activists that pay attention to these issues help us begin the conversation about what a sustainable, economically sustainable transition is going to look like in Iowa. I think roughly half the corn crop today goes into our gas tanks by way of ethanol. And if more of us are going to drive electric cars, we need to figure out kind of what our path forward is on this issue.
Representative Jacoby, did you have a comment? No. Okay, I thought I saw your hand at one point. No problem. Representative Mascher.
Thank you. Jared, thank you for the question, and thank you again for your advocacy and what you've been doing locally here. That makes a big difference. You know, we always talk about how politics makes strange bedfellows. When there was an attack, as you know, last year and the year before on the solar tax credit, and it was the Washington County farmers, and Kevin talks to them all the time, that really pushed back on that. Many of them have solar on their hog confinement operations. Go figure, right? And I laugh because we all have Republican family members, right? So after I put my solar panels on my home and had been talking about what a great savings it was and why the tax credits were really making a difference, my Republican brother put solar panels on his farm. And again, not a likely person that I would say would do that, but he is experiencing that savings now too. And he also, that's where I think we can make some inroads in terms of working with those folks to be able to get more of this done. The economics of it, and I think that was his motivation. He said, well, if everybody else is taking advantage of the tax credits, why can't I? And I said, exactly. And so if that's what it motivates them, that's fine. We just need more of them to be able to make that commitment. Thanks.
Thank you. Representative Bohannan.
Thanks. I just want to, I agree with everything that's been said. I just want to add one little thing. You know, one thing that's very interesting to me this session is that I have seen instances where lobbyists maybe aren't speaking up as much as they could, in part because of fear of retaliation. We have had, there is kind of a toxic environment right now with the way that some of the Republican legislation feels vindictive, actually pointed towards certain people. And I hate to say that, but it's true, and I've seen it happen. And it's made sometimes lobbyists a little bit shy about coming right out and speaking up about certain issues. And I just want to encourage people to continue to speak out about these things and really try to educate us about it. I actually saw an instance this past week where, I think it was this past week, the weeks are kind of running together, but recently where a Democratic member voted for a bill that was not very environmentally friendly, and it was a mistake. He just was misinformed because he had been told that something was environmentally friendly, because the science is sometimes a little bit hard to sort through on some of these environmental issues. And so just really encourage lobbyists to continue to speak out and to be really clear about the science, why certain things are good for the environment and why certain things are bad for the environment, just to make sure that we're able to do our jobs effectively as well. So it's hard and it can be scary, sometimes if you fear retaliation or something, but I think it's absolutely crucial that we continue to make this case loud and clear. So thank you.
Thank you. Next question comes from 100 Grannies, and Tina Kapp will be asking that question for them. Tina.
Hello, can you hear me?
You're breaking up a little bit, but let's give it a try.
Oh, okay. All right. Good. I hope you can hear me. So my name is Tina Kapp, and I am a member of the 100 Grannies since 2017. I'm also a retired registered nurse, and I've lived in Johnson County since 1977. So that's just my little background. So I'm going to do a follow-up question from last year regarding the quality of of our air and our water. Over 800 or 60% of our water samples from creeks, streams, and rivers.
Christina, Christina, I'm going to ask
2012 and 2016.
Christina, I'm going to ask you to move to your
We have
question.
our impaired waterways, and that's kind of based on their total maximum daily load. A more current
Christina,
that I have is from 2017, where the Iowa River Basin was sampled, and there were high levels of bacteria from manure and toxins from pesticides. So Iowa currently has 23 million hogs, and they're confined in these confined animal feeding operations, and Iowa has given permits to
Christina, I'm going to ask that you go to your question because we're way over time. So if you just pose your question for our legislators, please. Thank you.
Oh, okay. All right. So my question is, when will you push for a subcommittee in the Iowa House for a much needed moratorium on new plus additions to existing factory farms or CAFOs by supporting HR 440?
I just want to be sure that legislators heard the question. The question essentially is, where are we with the potential moratorium on new? Yes. Where are you on the moratorium, potential moratorium on new CAFOs or expansion of CAFOs in Iowa? Representative Jacoby.
Thank you, and thank you for the question.
Hello?
You know, annually, we
yes, I'm here.
Annually, Democrats have signed on to the moratorium on
yes,
CAFOs.
I did post my question, but the question is, when will you push for a subcommittee in the Iowa House for a much needed moratorium on new plus additions to existing factory farms or CAFOs by supporting HR 440?
That is actually an ongoing push. The Republicans have made it very clear that a resolution and or any bills will not get out of subcommittee this year. In fact, the only thing we did in terms of factory farms, CAFOs, or expansion is our poop digester for CAFOs bill.
Correct.
And it's not exactly, in my opinion, where we need to be, but I feel confident in saying the people you're talking to today on the panel are pushing hard to at least have a subcommittee. And I apologize, but the Republicans will not move that this year.
Representative Bohannan.
Yeah, same as Representative Jacoby. I was just going to say, I and many other Democrats joined Representative Stade's bill to limit new construction and so on of larger CAFOs, and it's just not moving. It's something that we, I'd say we, because I haven't been there, but others have done every year that I will continue to support. But it's a really tough to get any Republican support for that. sorry to say.
Senator Bolkcom.
Yeah, so Iowa's had this thing called the nutrient reduction strategy, I think since 2013. It's an attempt to reduce nitrate in Iowa waters, our rivers and lakes. If you talk to the people that monitor this, nitrate pollution is increasing, not decreasing over the last 7 years as we've been trying to reduce it. It's actually going in the wrong direction. People, the kind of the leaders of agriculture in Iowa, there's a whole menu of things we could do to begin to address nitrate pollution in our water, which, by the way, our cities try and treat the water that comes down the river for us, but we still have very high levels of nitrate. Meets the federal standard, but we still have very high levels of nitrate in our water in Iowa City and in places like Des Moines where you get surface water. But we have the leaders of the ag industries in Iowa have been unwilling really to come to the table to do much of anything. There's a menu of things we can do. Obviously, the moratorium is a fairly strong medicine, right? To say we're not going to have any more CAFOs. So that's one maybe end of the spectrum. The other is there's a number of smaller things we could do to address this issue by way of buffer strips along rivers and streams, around siting issues, around ownership issues. We have this thing called the master matrix that we've had. I don't know how long that's been around, 20 years, 18 years since its inception. We haven't changed like one single word of that law over that period of time. And so we really need people in agriculture to step forward and work with people in Iowa to address these issues. I don't know, in the last year, we've had 20 boards of supervisors over the last few years, conservative and liberal boards of supervisors send letters to the Department of Natural Resources saying they want more involvement in this. So it's an issue that we are not going to solve without some progressive leadership from our ag industry.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Kinney.
This is one of the things that I know it's not going to go anywhere. Especially the moratorium. I think it's one of the things that we can look at. We can try to work on. Am I for the moratorium? No, not at this point, because we need to try to keep people, and this is one of the ways that we can get young people back on to our farms. If they can't make a living out here, it's going to 33% of our state budget is directly affected to agriculture. So that's kind of where I'm at on it. Is it something that we should look at? I think it's always something that we should look at to be able to try to improve. There are a lot of, Senator Bolkcom has said, ways that farmers that can improve this, and I think that we should continue to strive to farm better.
Thank you, Senator. We are now going to turn to questions from the audience, and we'll be monitoring the chat, and I will pose questions to legislators as we are able. We are likely to not get to every question that's there, but we will try to get to as many as we can. I'm going to begin with a question regarding nuclear energy. Are you in favor of allowing the construction of fourth generation nuclear reactors? Senator Wahls.
Well, I was actually chatting with Carl a little bit in the chat when I saw that come through. I'm not at this point aware of any state legislation that would prohibit moving in that direction. I understand that there's this new technology around the fourth generation nukes is very different from what we had kind of historically. I think maybe down in Palo, and so I don't frankly, Carl, know enough about the technology yet. But we do know that we need a base load source of electricity that is not carbon intensive, and I'd certainly be open to learning more about those fourth generation. The one thing that I would say is that I know that the cost for solar and wind and batteries is just dropping like a rock right now. And so cost would definitely be something that we would need to look at. Obviously, safety, environmental impact continues to be a priority for everything, both on the carbon side and on non-carbon related elements. But certainly happy to connect with you about it offline. And I know it's something that I've heard you talk about in the past. So glad to see you with us today, and certainly happy to try and learn more about it.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Bolkcom.
Yeah, thanks. Great. Thanks for the question. I was a proponent of keeping the Palo plant in operation as long as we could in Cedar Rapids. And of course, they decided to close that plant because the cost of the power, baseload power coming from that plant was more expensive than the competition, which in Iowa has been all this wind energy that's come online. So they've decided obviously to mothball that. But I understand they're going to use that site, just announced, I think in the last week, they're going to put up a huge solar array at the Palo nuclear plant site. So that's fantastic. In terms of fourth generation, I can't say that I'm totally opposed. Mid-American Energy about a decade ago proposed to do like the next generation nuclear, and I was opposed to it at the time, and I think Mid-America made a good decision by moving away from it. I would like to see this actually in operation somewhere before we in Iowa commit to it in any kind of meaningful way. I'd like to make sure it really makes sense. It is about cost. The renewables are getting cheaper. So, when you think about bringing on a new energy source, it's somehow got to compete in the marketplace. And the renewables, because frankly, with taxpayer support, they are really cost effective. You might not know this, but the Mid-American, who has done a fantastic job of putting up wind turbines in Iowa, they're somewhere north of $12 billion in investment. Virtually 100% of that physical plant investment of those turbines have been paid for by the production tax credit vis-a-vis federal and state taxpayers, right? They get enormous tax credits to build those systems. They've essentially gotten the entire amount they've invested in those turbines from taxpayers. So it's important to remember, kind of the importance of, I think, of public policy as we think about our renewable and energy future.
Thank you, Senator. Our next question comes on behalf of the Iowa Bicycle Coalition. Can the senators comment on whether they plan to support Senate File 70, which is an enhanced penalties bill dealing with motorists who pass bicycles unsafely and cause injury or death? Senator Bolkcom.
Yeah, happy to. This is a long overdue bill. We need stiffer penalties. I mean, pretty much, there have been a lot of fatalities in Iowa by people not paying attention that are driving their cars, and I didn't see them. And now we have a dead person that's on a bike, right? And I've often kind of joked that if you want to kill somebody, buy them a bike and go run over them, because there hasn't been much penalty or any penalty. So I'm in favor of that. There's also legislation. I don't think it's going anywhere, but we need to get to hand-free phones in automobiles. We need to have, if people are going to talk on the phone in their car, you can't have it in your hand. We need to aggressively try and get that done. I've introduced legislation in the last couple of years. Distracted driving is an enormous problem for people that want to bike safely.
Thank you. Senator Kinney.
I just want to say that I do plan to support this legislation. I've supported it in a committee when I was on transportation the last 2 years. I am not this year, but I think it is legislation that is there to protect individuals.
Our next question comes from the Johnson County Interfaith Coalition. The coalition is concerned about the effect of environmental pollutants, particularly on people of color. Please comment on what the legislature is doing to protect citizens from lead in their drinking water, and also comment on what the legislature is doing to advance protections against environmental hazards in our communities. Senator Wahls.
Yeah, so thanks for the question. Environmental racism is a huge problem. We know that people of color, low-income communities, other marginalized groups bear the brunt of environmental pollution. The statistics on this, I mean, if people don't think that pollution can be racist, environmental justice, there's a huge amount of research on this. That is, I think, overwhelmingly conclusive. I mean, we all have heard about what happened in Flint, Michigan, with the lead in the water in Michigan. And I thought it was great to see in the last couple of weeks here that there's actually finally going to be some real accountability for what happened up there so many years ago. In terms of what's happening in Iowa, the legislature, the Republicans in the Iowa Senate, I think 2 years ago now, actually proposed no longer requiring tests for lead and water in public schools. That might sound just like impossible or hard to believe, but in fact, the Senate Republicans passed that legislation out of the Senate 2 years ago. I don't believe that became law because it was stopped in the House. But just in terms of like a level setting, that's where Republicans in the legislature are. In terms of proactive legislation to try and ameliorate the effects of environmental pollution on communities of color, it's not happening. Republicans don't think it's an issue. And so I don't want to sound completely like a Debbie Downer, but you basically got one group of people who believe this is an issue and understand why it happens. And you had another group of people who don't believe it's an issue and don't think that it happens. And so that's kind of just where we are in terms of the status quo. I think it would be terrific to see the Biden administration move on bringing that environmental justice focus to its energy policy. And I think that Secretary Granholm will do that. She's the former governor of Michigan before the Flint water crisis happened. So she's very aware of that dynamic. And I think she's going to bring that perspective to federal policy, and hopefully that'll affect things here in Iowa.
Representative Mascher.
Thank you. The House Democrats have proposed legislation on all of these issues regarding lead, and especially lead in our school drinking water. Obviously, we know lead has an enormous impact, especially for younger children. And we can't even get those bills to be moved out of committee. So it tells you that it's kind of that out of sight, out of mind. They don't believe that if we don't measure it, then there's not a problem, right? And obviously there is, and it needs to be addressed. I think we're going to end up with some class action laws against folks who are ignoring this. And I don't know what else to say other than we can keep proposing, keep having the discussion and recommending that these bills get moved, but they're in control and they decide what does and doesn't move in committee. And we just have not been able to make those inroads. So unless others around the state are able to weigh in and talk to their own legislators, I'm not sure that we're going to be able to get anything done. Thanks.
Thank you. Representative Jacoby.
Thank you. Well, former Representative Wayne Ford was an absolute champion when it came to lead paint and abatement. He still works on that when he lives in Des Moines, but it has fallen off the cliff. And I have to tell you a quote from a fellow House member, a Republican. When I mentioned lead paint, he said, as long as you don't eat it, you're going to be fine. We don't need to do anything.
Senator Bolkcom.
Yeah, thanks. Great question. I mean, I don't think there's much going on in the Iowa General Assembly on doing anything dealing with racial inequality on any topic, whether it's environmental justice issues or any other. In fact, there's a number of bills that you could say are increasing the inequities across a number of platforms. The lead issue in Iowa, in terms of, I'm talking about drinking water in schools. I know members have worked on this. There's been legislation this year to try and address that. There's actually a federal requirement from the federal EPA for every school building in Iowa to have their water tested. And we have folks here at the University of Iowa, Dave Chortney, who works at the Center for the Health Effects of Environmental Contamination, that's working on both lead in private drinking water wells, think of on the farm or people that live in the country on their own wells, as well as he has a project looking at lead in our school buildings. And there's a real opportunity here, I think. I don't think the bills are going to move. But one idea that he has brought forward is the idea, if you think of a school, there are dozens of outlets where kids can drink water. And rather than going in and spending the money on testing dozens of outlets, go in and install bottle fillers that we all have become familiar with the last few years, where you can put a lead filter on it and then encourage the kids to get their water from the bottle fillers. And so there's legislation around that. It also appears that bottle fillers are a really good way to not spread the coronavirus. And so there might be possibility through the Department of Education with some of the coronavirus pandemic relief funds to actually give grants to schools to get a twofer, reduce the transmission of colds and flus at drinking fountains, but also deal with the lead problem. And in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be meeting with the director of the Department of Education and her staff that work on this, and Mr. Chwartney, to begin to see if we can come to maybe some not legislative solution, but one where we could move ahead through the Department of Education's leadership in using these resources.
Thank you. Question from Rentizo, a drone spraying company in Iowa City. They are interested in learning more about the pesticide bill that Senator Kennedy alluded to earlier.
This is basically, right now in Iowa, the Department of Agriculture has the ability to fine, on a civil penalty, fine custom applicators for overspraying or something that the applicator has done wrong. There has never been in place anything on the private applicator's license. Everybody has to have a license to spray, but they do not have the ability to fine private applicators. A number of years ago, I believe in 2017, the EPA, I believe it was, stated that Iowa had to come in compliance by a year ago. They were not in compliance, and that's by doing this, we are mirroring the custom applicators penalties, and it would be referred over to the private applicators. One of the things that we did add into this is that if an applicator has done something wrong, one of the things is, and one of the penalties is going to be, you have to recertify and retake the class. Well, this does one of two things. No, it's not a big monetary fine, but if you're paying someone to spray your crops and you have $100,000 sprayer there, you are ultimately monetarily fining that person.
Senator Wahls.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Michael. I think Senator Kinney just did a good job of laying out. A good chunk of this bill is about bringing us into compliance with some of the federal rules that are up there. But I think that for Rentizo, just given the way that you all operate, I think that your concerns about this, I think, should be relatively low. For those of you who don't know, Rentizo is an Iowa City-based company that uses drone technology to do much more targeted spraying for, rather than the big machines that you see out there, with the huge booms and all that. Rentizo does drone applicators. You all can get a lot closer to the ground than kind of traditional dusting operations or even some of those larger sprayers. So, I'd be interested in your thoughts. If you want to send maybe me or Senator Kinney an email about this, we'd certainly be happy to take a look if you have other considerations or concerns. But in terms of the drift potential violations, unless I've got a kind of a misunderstanding of the legislation, I don't think that that's something that your team would have to be as concerned about.
Thank you. Senator Bolkcom.
Yeah, the issue of drift it's been a growing problem across Iowa as more crop, from the air pesticide applications going on. So I've tracked this issue over the last few years as we've worked on it, but You know, when you get damaged by somebody that sprays your yard or your crop, that might be an organic crop, it's also really costly. So we've had kind of a fairly laissez-faire approach to this, in my view, and I hope anything that this bill does puts a little more teeth in making sure we hold people accountable that do sloppy work, or apply pesticides when the wind's blowing at 25 miles an hour.
Thank you, Senator. We have a number of questions in the chat. I'm going to focus on the questions around our theme today first, and then if we have time, I'll go back to questions that are beyond the theme of the day. There is a question about ethanol and the transition that Senator Bolkcom referred to earlier. And so I'm going to just throw out an opportunity for any additional comments on the issue of whether there's work being done to make Iowa less exposed to a fall off in ethanol demand from the development of e-vehicles and changing congressional mandates and so on. So are there any additional comments about that notion of transition and the potential effect that we may see in the future on demand for ethanol? Or what that means for corn growers? Senator Bolkcom.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really difficult topic, I think. I mean, when you think about the production agriculture producing, you know, half of what its work on in terms of corn going into ethanol. And if you think down the, you know, 10, 15 years from now is not that far off, is trying to figure out if we're going to, I mean, I assume we're going to have charging stations on I-80, that Iowa is going to embrace electric vehicles at some point. That we're not going to be like an island where we're going to do internal combustion engines until the last gallon is burned. But I don't really get the sense that from the majority party that they see this as something that they should do policy around to get ahead of, to make Iowa a place where, you know, if people want to drive electric cars, I hope they feel like they can come to Iowa and drive them. So. But it is an enormous economic challenge, I think, you know, to the livelihoods potentially. You know, if you think about coal mining and we're going to use less coal, what the impact of that's been in coal states, right? Maybe there's another market for biofuels besides automobiles and trucks, but I think the future is going to be in electric vehicles. And I just think at some point we need to begin the conversation here about how to make sure the transition can be an orderly one and one that doesn't do economic damage to ag producers.
Thank you. Senator Wahls.
Yeah, I would echo what Senator Bolkcom just said. The industry is, I think, slowly starting to think about this question. The Iowa Renewable Fuels folks, the ethanol and biodiesel people, are at the Capitol. You see them, hey, we got all these electric vehicles rolling out. What's the plan? I think they're starting to realize that it's a potential existential threat, frankly, to ethanol. I don't know if they feel like they've got a game plan yet for how to bridge that gap, but I think that they can start to see that it's something that they are worried about. I think the key for us is going to be to ensure that we do not see any kind of government mandates that would prevent electric vehicles from being utilized. I don't think we'll see that, but something that you always want to keep an eye out for. We want to make sure that these technologies are able to compete and that consumers have the choice between whether they want an internal combustion engine car or an electric vehicle. And so I think that's going to be a key thing. And then I think as we start thinking about the long term, 10 to 15 years sounds like a long time, maybe not, I don't know. But Joe's shaking his head. It's not a long time. It's going to be here before we know it. And so, we really do need to start thinking really critically about these questions and what, because to Senator Kinney's point, a third of our state budget is affected by agriculture in some way. If half of the market for corn is going in a different direction, that has a big impact on all of us. And so I certainly, whenever I'm talking with the renewable fuels folks, I'm always kind of badgering them. Hey, what's the plan here? How are we gonna make this transition happen? Because if we're not thinking about it, we're not planning for it. The last thing that we want is for people to be caught by surprise. So, we'll see what happens here in the next couple of weeks on this, ethanol standard mandate, whatever you want to call it. It would not surprise me to see it pass, although I expect it'll be amended pretty dramatically on the floor. There's a lot of different moving parts on this, but from a big picture perspective, you're absolutely right that that transition is going to have to happen. We got to start thinking about that now, because if we're caught unawares by it, it's going to have a huge impact on all of us in a negative way.
Representative Bohannan.
Yeah, thanks. Just to add to that, we do need to watch for legislation that attempts to put a damper on new technology. There's a bill in the House right now that basically prohibits local governments from regulating, impeding, prohibiting in any way natural gas and propane. And that's a response, I think, to some other cities that have started to, at the local government level, to put restrictions on the use of natural gas. And so, we do have that instinct in the legislature right now to be very protectionist of existing technologies and to try to keep that change from happening. And so I think that we are going to have to, really pay attention in the state legislature to those kinds of attempts. And I think that this is a place where the federal government could really, really be helpful. The issue about having charging stations along I-80 and things like that, that is right for federal government regulation. I mean, that deals directly with interstate travel. And the ability of people to go from one state where there are these charging stations to drive their electric vehicle through Iowa onto other places. And so I think I'm hopeful that we'll see some work on that at the federal level to keep the state legislature from impeding that kind of new technology if it were so inclined to do that.
Thank you. We have a question about the bottle bill, which was referenced earlier today. Currently, Iowa's bottle bill doesn't cost taxpayers 1 cent. The cost is borne by those who profit, the distributors and retailers, grocers. What is the likelihood that Iowa's bottle bill will be updated to assist taxpayers instead of favoring retail outlets? Okay, Representative Bohannan.
Well, right now there are a number of different proposals on the horizon, and as Representative Mascher said earlier, the thing that concerns me is we don't have much time to deal with this. I mean, we have not had the subcommittee on this yet. Right now, there are several different bills that are kind of being dealt with, and we're going to have to figure out which way we're going to go. We haven't had the subcommittee, let alone the committee, but we have to get it out of committee by this week, or else it's dead. So I want to see what happens this week. It's hard to say right now exactly what direction we're going to go. Personally, for me, I would love to see the bottle bill expanded to include things, like bottled water, bottled tea, or can, all of those different beverages that are not currently included. I mean, this bottle bill is very outdated in terms of the types of containers that are covered. So I would love to see that happen. And I really need more work to incentivize redemption centers to make sure that those can be profitable. So I would certainly favor adding another penny or so to that handling fee to make sure that that they can be incentivized. Those are the two things that I would really love to see happen in this bill. Right now, the bill that I'm working on, that I've been assigned to, comes up with a solution where it allows grocery stores to not handle the containers if they contract with a redemption center, but the redemption center has to be within a certain distance of the grocery store. And right now, I think that's one of the sticking points, is how far away those are, because right now people are having to drive way too far to deposit those bottles. So that's being debated. I think the House file is better than the Senate file. The House file, it says it has to be within 10 miles for larger counties, and it has to be within 15 miles of smaller counties. The Senate file had said 20. It can be 20 miles. That's 40 miles people are having to drive back and forth to those redemption centers. So I hope that we can come to something better in the House, but there's a lot of work to do this week on this. So I would welcome anybody's comments on that. Thank you.
Representative Mascher.
Thank you. I wish Representative Kaufman was on this call, because he has been assigned that bill in state government. It normally would have been an environmental protection bill in terms of that committee, but the fact that it was assigned to state government tells me that it's real and something will happen this year. So I think you will see a bottle bill that is passed And I think what they've been doing, and this is what's unfortunate, they have been meeting with all of the stakeholders, but Democrats have not been at the table for those discussions. There are 5 different bottle bills that have been floating around out there. All 5 of them have the same 5 subcommittee members. Representative Bohannan is one of them in terms of in the House. But if she hasn't been able to be at the table for those discussions, all she can do is react to what they are proposing. And she is right. They are looking at, you would contract with the Redemption Center if you are a grocery store, or you would also be able to continue to take cans and bottles back at your facility. But the anticipation is most of them would contract with a Redemption Center. And again, how far away is that center is a big bone of contention, and obviously that'll have to be resolved. But again, we're hoping that they will increase the number of containers that can be recycled. I think everybody is appreciative of that. Grocers want it out of their grocery stores. And so they will have the option of, again, contracting with a Redemption Center, or they will be able to have drop boxes at their facility, at their own grocery store outside. And so that accomplishes a couple of things. It gets it out of the grocery store, which is their big issue, but still allows people to be able to recycle them. Right now, Costco, there's a whole bunch of groups that don't recycle at all. And so those are the kinds of things that we need to require all of them to do. If you sell it, you've got to do either a contract with the Redemption Center to get them back, or you've got to take them back yourself. And that's one of the pieces that we are very strong about in terms of you've got to do one or the other. Thanks.
Thank you. Senator Bolkcom?
Yeah, I think without legislation this year, the bottle bill is going to unravel. And so there is pressure on the Republicans who are going to decide what we do on this to get something done. There was a bill came out of a Senate committee this week that would require, and it lets the grocers off the hook. They don't have to take cans anymore. It will require a Redemption Center within 20 miles, which is way too far. It would allow for the aluminum that goes to the independent recycling center to be owned and kept by that center to be used to pay for the operation. Now the cans go back to the the distributors like Budweiser or Coca-Cola, and they get the value of the aluminum. The bill transitions in a year or so, the oversight to the alcohol beverage division from DNR. I think what's missing in this is that the unclaimed deposits, which adds up to millions of dollars a year, go to the taxpayer relief fund. If we're going to have an independent collection system, we have to get more money into those companies like the Can Shed in our area. And if you're going to have this in 99 counties, there's got to be more money to set up these businesses. The unclaimed deposits, I believe, need to go to the redemption centers as an incentive. There's this bill in the Senate increases for 1 year the handling fee from 1 cent to 2 cents, and then that goes away. And of course, this aluminum that's sold ought to be the product of, or ought to be owned by the Redemption Center too. So I think there's money in the system to make it work. One of the things that the grocers proposed a few years ago was they would kick in several $1 million for a number of years to get these systems in place as they exited. They don't have any skin in the game right now. And I hope that we can press for the grocers, if we're going to let them off the hook, that they help invest in the development of this new collection system.
Thank you. Representative Jacoby, did you want to add anything?
Actually, it's been said, but I do think we need to rebase our whole system of recycling, not only with the bottle bill, but we have to steer away from it having to be a financial model and make a decision as a city, county, state, and nation if we want to recycle or not.
Thank you.
Could I just add one thing to Joe's comment?
Sure.
Joe talked about the bottle bill unraveling, and that's what we're seeing right now, because only 60% of our cans and bottles are actually being recycled through the existing program. People are putting them in their curbside because Again, we haven't raised, we should be at 10 cents now instead of 5 cents per can. And we haven't done anything to address that either. So again, unless we do something, it won't mean anything because people are doing less and less of the recycling of those products.
Thank you. One of the biggest sources of nitrogen pollution is synthetic nitrogen on crops. Are you in favor of funding research into nitrogen fixation in corn so they don't require synthetic nitrogen? Thank you, Senator Bolkcom. Any other comments on that? Senator Kinney, did you want to weigh in on that?
You're still muted, Kevin.
My screen just went blank and I couldn't figure out where anything was. Yeah, it's something that we need to look at. That's one of the we need to continue to look at the products that are adhering the nitrogen, especially the anhydrous, to the soil, much like the hog manure or cattle manure in general. It's something that I can see sometime or someday that they are going to try to mandate, or we should be looking at mandating the application of anhydrous or fertilizers in the fall. Some farmers tend to typically put on more fertilizer than what's needed. And if you use these products, you can put on less fertilizer. And I think anytime we can look at improving a product, we should be.
Thank you, Senator. This will be our last question. It's one that came in from Facebook, and it is a bit beyond our topic for the day, but I'm going to go ahead and pose it as we get close to wrapping up. Are you aware of any bills in support for the Children's Behavioral Health System, which was created in 2019, had no support in 2021, and now we are in, or no support in 2020, and now we are in 2021? Children's Behavioral Health System. Any comments on that? Representative Mascher.
So we're really good about talking about plans and putting them in place and then not funding them. And that's been our problem with the children's mental health system. We finally have an articulated plan, but we still do not have a way of state funding, and that's an enormous problem. Obviously, they were trying to put that on top of the adult system, and we know that that doesn't work. And the needs of children are different than adults, and we need to be aware of that as well. But it's been really frustrating. I have been asked to go back and look at all of the programs we've created and not funded, because creating them does nothing if you don't put the money behind it to actually have it work. And so that's been our frustration. Some counties are doing a better job than others. And again, they're taking money from the adult system to be able to provide those kinds of services for children. But we do not have an articulated plan at this time in terms of how to fund the children's system, and that's unfortunate.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Jacoby.
Thank you. Yeah, it is extremely frustrating. We talked the talk over the previous 3 years, and yet to fund it. And on a more narrow scope, House File 50 is up in front of the Commerce Committee. And this is to help funding and also mandate that insurance cover PKU and other challenges that children and families have. And it is not moving. and this is a small piece of the bigger question that was asked, but we talk about it or we create what's called a line item, but then the line item is zeroed out. It's not funded or funded directly. And that's one thing I can honestly say to everyone on this, in this forum, legislators and participants are fighting hard to get this done.
Thank you, Representative. Well, thanks to everyone. Thanks to those with questions and thanks to legislators with answers for an informative session today. Also, thanks to our co-sponsors, CAFE, the Iowa City Area Group of the Sierra Club, Iowa City Climate Activists, and 100 Grannies, and to the local television staff for recording this event and live streaming it on the League's Facebook page. Rebroadcasts of this forum will be run on Iowa City Channel 4 and Coral Vision. See their respective websites for programming schedules. Of interest to many of you, I think, are some upcoming events that we would like to alert you to. Our league is partnering with the University of Iowa Public Policy Center to present Policy Transitions with Changing Administrations, a series of discussions. The first discussion, Transportation's Digital Infrastructure, or Eisenhower 2.0, will be held Tuesday, March 9th from 7 to 8:30 p.m. As control transfers between administrations, priorities change. Join us for an engaging series of virtual discussions about policy transitions over the course of our history. Registration is required for the Zoom presentations, and to register, you can go to the Iowa Public Policy website and look under events where you'll find a link. The discussion then in this series shifts later to energy infrastructure transitioning to the future, a topic we've talked about today, as a matter of fact. On Tuesday, March 23rd from 7 to 8:30 p.m. In this installment, members of the Environmental Policy Research Program will discuss how the energy infrastructure might transition in the future. Watch the League of Women Voters Facebook page for more programs and more details. Our next legislative forum will be March 27th from 9:30 to 11:30 a.m., where the focus will be on issues of social justice. We hope you all will join us then. Thank you all for being here today.